this afternoon, I chose a topic to talk about FOMO by Como. And, 2004, a student named Patrick, when he was pursuing his MBA, much like many of you here, at the Harvard Business School, came up with the term FOMO. He wrote an article for the local student newspaper. Little did he know that a decade later, that will go on to become a word in the dictionary. So what is FOMO? Fear of missing out. What does that get you? It is the omnipresent anxiety brought on by our cognitive ability to recognize potential opportunities. I know fear of missing out sounds much easier, right? But in reality, what this means is that these anxiety that is produced by various options that you have causes you FOMO, it's a noun, causes you anxiety, stress. And FOMO comes in many forms. In fact, this afternoon, I had a FOMO listening to Shweta, who was talking about big data and AI, and I realized I should be back in my technology world, and I'm not. I'm here in the healthcare world. I also had FOMO listening to Sarah, when I thought I should be back in New York and enjoying those fresh air and good meals and the nightclubs I used to go to when I was living in New York. I also had FOMO listening to our famous footballer, thinking maybe I should have pursued a career in golf, because I'm actually, I think I'm good in golf, but not really. So FOMO comes in many ways. And of course, many of you will view FOMO as perhaps that invite to the party of your friends that you didn't get, or the fact that your friends are going on a holiday and you were not invited, or the fact a friend of yours got a job at a company that you wanted to work for, or a family member who did not call you on the day of your birthday or something. So FOMO happens in many ways. Now, when it comes to in a social setting, when I was 11 years old, I was at DPS Archaeopuram, and some of my friends were talking about becoming a fighter pilot. And I thought that was a good idea, so I enrolled myself a year later at the Rashtriya Indian Military College in Dehradun, just because I thought I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That summer, my parents had moved to Africa. They took me on a holiday for the summer break to Nigeria. There I saw their expatriate lifestyle, their, big houses, big cars, parties, lots of fun, compared to my army school, military school, where I had to carry bricks on my back and run around the park. So I decided I wanted to no longer be in the army school. So I blackmailed my father to get me out of the school and threatened him that if he didn't get me out of school, I would break my legs and become medically unfit. I was 11 years old. So unfortunately, fortunately, he agreed to that and got me back to Africa. A few years later, I was finishing my high school in Africa, and a bunch of my classmates were writing this engineering school entrance exam. I had no intentions of being in Africa any longer. My parents were coming back to India. And I said, oh, I must write that exam too. And I wrote that exam. Unfortunately or fortunately, I got into an engineering school. So then the choice was, well, you stay back and you go to a hostel, live in a hostel, which, in retrospect, was the military school would have been better. But I ended up in an African hostel. Finished my undergrad, and then I found that my friends wanted to move to Canada or the US. So I thought, all right, I should be in Canada and US. I got myself admitted in a grad school in Canada. Once I graduated, I got a job, and I realized all the smart ones were getting MBAs. Notice the smart ones getting the MBAs? And all the smart ones were getting MBAs. And so I thought maybe I should get an MBA as well. So I enrolled myself in a business school, much like you. Came out of the business school, I realized that technology, this is 98, many of you were not born, but it was 98. And I realized that technology boom was happening, so I must be in technology. So I got a job at a company in Dallas for a year in technology. And then the great excitement was happening around entrepreneurship, and all the new startups were happening, and I said, you know what, I want to be a startup as well. So I then left my job and moved to San Francisco and started my first company. So the point I'm making, friends, is that if I look back, a lot of my decisions were indeed influenced by FOMO. So it's not just about your social settings or your social environment that you feel FOMO. I think FOMO is something that we all face. I was lucky. I was lucky that the opportunities I was presented with, or the FOMO I had about, was for relatively good things, and I ended up in the right way. But that may not be true today, because today we are all faced with a lot of information. Whether it's Facebook, social media, smartphones, we are tempted. There's a lot of temptation coming your way in every form, every sort. And that temptation is leading to more and more FOMO, and it is not likely, it is not guaranteed that all of you will find the right path if you only go with FOMO. So therefore, you have to think about how do you cope with this real phenomena, which has been coined recently, maybe in 2004, but it's something that has been around and real for all of us, and many of us would see that many of our decisions are based on this particular fact. So the first thing to managing FOMO is that you ought to think about, you ought to recognize that FOMO is real, and you must value it, and you must recognize it. So how do you cope? How did I cope with all those decisions? And what choices have I made after a certain part of my life, my second phase of my life, when I crossed 40 and you start to reflect on life and you start to relive, reboot. So at that time, I realized that there were certain things that were important to me that I was not achieving or getting. Much like Sarah talked about, that our family is important. So you realize that family for me was very important. So I was working for multinationals, running startups. I was traveling a lot. I was spending about 200 days a year in hotels away, traveling globally. But I was spending time away from my family. So I made a decision that family was important to me. So what I'm saying is that if you are thinking about how do you cope up with FOMO, you have to define your core morals, your core values. You need to understand your personal core values, core morals. Now, what is core values or core morals? Every living system, whether it's every organization or a group, has core values. If you look at religion, Hinduism has core values like dharma, karma, Veda. Sikhism, kirat karo, charity, do good work. Islam, Christianity, every religion has certain core values that they bring down their principles to. Corporates have core values. If you look at Tata, you look at Apple, you look at Google, they all talk about innovation, they talk about truth, they talk about trying new things, simplicity. Apple talks about simplicity as one of their core values. So every organization or a system has certain core values. In fact, families have core values. Some families think that wearing a certain type of clothing for their children is important, it's part of the core value. Certain families believe that bowing down to your elders is part of your core value, and others don't think that is part of their core value. So families have core values. Governments have core values. You have constitutions. Countries have core values. You have constitution. India has a constitution which we always go down to as being our core value. So the question is, why are those core values? Because core values are helping solve complex decisions for those organizations. So for each one of you, you must think about what your personal core morals are or your values are. For me, as I mentioned, family was one. The second core value for me has been pursuit of knowledge. Looking for the learning mindset. I think Shweta also mentioned earlier that is one of the important assets. I wish I'd met her earlier. I would have been more proud of my pursuit of knowledge, but it is a part of my core value. And the third piece is being honest to yourself. recognizing where you are, where do you fail. So today, I moved back to India 8 years ago after being away for 30 years. I started this current company. I knew nothing about dentistry. I'm not a dentist. I'm an engineer by training. I had never worked in India. I came back after 30 years and decided I wanted to be in healthcare because it's part of my core values. I wanted to be next to my family. I moved because of my parents and my wife's parents so that my children could have grandparents. I wanted to focus on new innovation, bring in something new, and I realized that healthcare in India was not the same level that I had seen in the West. And within healthcare, I wanted to choose dentistry because dentistry had certain aspects that was very, very unique. 90% of Indians have oral disease, so it's a very widespread issue, yet not many of us think about it very hard. So the core values of family, the core values of pursuit of knowledge, and then recognizing that I am actually not a dentist, that I don't know enough about dentistry, I brought on teams of people who could help me in that area. So that is how my way I have managed FOMO, I continue to manage today. So I am not interested in living in New York because I do enjoy living with my family in India. I am not interested in going back to technology because I am making a difference in healthcare. And I am not going to pursue a sporting career because golf is a hobby, not a career for me. So friends, I wish the best of luck to all of you, and I hope that you will think about FOMO and you will manage it by COMO. Thank you. All right.